Here comes the, y'all don't really want it like that. Yeah. Here comes the.
Yo, what is going on, YouTube? It is your boy, Steezy A. Smith, and I'm your host, Calvin-Domingo, actually, aka Steezy A. Smith. Welcome back to yet another Seattle Seahawks Roundtable episode / show. Joining me today will be a couple of very, very, very important and special guests. I have two ladies from the Pacific Northwest Showdown podcast hopping by for about 10 to 15 minutes. I got my brother at Mr. Squabo Says hopping on in the next 5 to 10 minutes. And then we have one more guest towards the end that I won't reveal his identity just yet, just so I can kind of keep the suspense going just a little bit. Obviously, I know there's been a whole bunch of breaking news in the NFL ever since our beloved Russell Wilson has been traded. We've seen Aaron Rodgers re-sign with the Packers. We've seen Commander Carson become a thing in Washington. We've seen Khalil Mack be traded to the Chargers. We've seen J.C. Jackson sign with the Chargers. And so the Chargers are out there making moves. There's so many different teams. I know today was the first official day of free agency. We'll touch on free agency in just a little bit. But first, I do want to talk about the reports from earlier today. Reportedly, Deshaun Watson has rejected the Seattle Seahawks as a potential destination in regards to a potential trade. And so right now, because he's scheduled to meet with the Saints and I think it was the Panthers, there is a report also that came out tomorrow that mentioned, I think it was via Josina Anderson. She was talking about how he will meet with other teams tomorrow. But right now, I think the way that I'm reading the situation, it's looking like it's going to be down to the Panthers and the New Orleans Saints. Ultimately, I think he lands in New Orleans. I'll tell you guys later why. And I'm not gonna lie, I don't know how you guys feel about Deshaun Watson to Seattle in the first place. I don't know if you guys were kind of rooting for that. I don't know if you were against it. Me personally, I wasn't super enamored with it. I definitely would have entertained it, but I definitely had some reasons as to why Seattle shouldn't have pulled the trigger. But I kind of just compare the situation, and I'm talking about Deshaun Watson rejecting the Seahawks. I kind of compare it to being rejected, by, from my point of view, from my perspective, if I go out and I see a beautiful woman and I know that she's out there on the market and she's single and I just broke up with my girl and I'm in the market, she's in the market. And at first there's interest, on both sides. And eventually you get rejected, and to me, I've got rejected a few times before. It's definitely not a problem, but there's other options out there. Plenty of fish in the sea. And so I'm not going to take it too hard, as should Seattle. I don't think I don't think the Seahawks should definitely be turned off by this. I mean, this is an opportunity to build through the draft. This is an opportunity to sign a potential bridge quarterback. It may be a Jameis Winston, maybe a Marcus Mariota, maybe even go towards the draft and take a Malik Willis. If Pete Carroll is so intent on, and if he has such an infatuation with the ground game, why not take a Malik Willis, for example? Just because with the Malik Willis, you could install an offense like a Philadelphia, like a Baltimore. You can have your own version of a Jalen Hurts, of a Lamar Jackson. Malik Willis, you take away the bad off his scouting report, and you see a whole lot of Russell Wilson. You see a guy who loves to throw the deep ball. You see a guy who's a great leader. You see a guy who's a great locker room guy. You see a guy who elevates those around him. You see a guy that loves to throw outside of the numbers. And so the similarities go on and on and on and on. Now he's a project. He's raw. I don't know if he would start in year one. He'd probably have some serious competition with maybe a Jameis Winston or Marcus Mariota, whoever Seattle decides to bring in. But there's definitely plenty of options that Seattle could pivot towards. It does not mean that the world is over because, we don't have a Deshaun Watson in place. I know there are a lot of fans kind of lean towards one end and then the other end of the spectrum. And so I think it's safe to say that it was pretty divided. And so that being said, I'm curious because Deshaun Watson is no longer an option. Aside from the guys that I talked about earlier, there's a Gardner Minshew. He's perhaps an option. He did play at Washington State in his final year of college football. And so maybe Seattle decides to pony up a mid-round pick, a 4th or a 5th rounder to the Eagles. They don't need him, at least not right now. And so join with me, though. I will allow him to wait no longer. My good friend, I think by now you guys know who I'm talking about. Like I mentioned, Squabo. Please, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, man. We're trying to get my brother to 1,000 on YouTube. So please, without any further ado, welcome my brother, as Squabo says.
Hey.
How you doing today, my brother?
Man, it's a beautiful day outside, man. It's starting to heat up a little bit. I'm over in Pullman, Washington on the east side, and the weather has been cold, but it's getting better. It's improving. I went outside. I went to the store today without putting on a jacket. It was crazy.
Hey, I wish I could say the same. I'm over here in my own room still freezing. I turn the heater on here every now and then, and I wake up, I'm still freezing. So I'm hoping that some of that warm weather can kind of travel and migrate over here in the Seattle area. But bro, is your heart broken? Because I know you were kind of the mindset that we should trade for Deshaun Watson, and so I know you were the first person who actually broke the news to me. How do you feel about Deshaun Watson no longer viewing Seattle as an option?
It's fine, okay? Yes, I would have loved to have Deshaun Watson in Seattle if and only if everything that's come out proves that he is innocent. Because if he's done the things he was accused of, I don't want him in Seattle. But what Deshaun Watson brings to the table, he's won at every level, high school, college, except NFL, right? And he's going from a franchise in Houston to, if he were to go to Seattle, he'd be going to a better overall organization. He'd be going to a more well-run organization. But I can understand why he was turned off. And these are things that we talked about on my show last Friday. Steezy, part of the problem that Deshaun Watson, I'm sure, is seeing in Seattle, first of all, the mentality, run first. But second of all, is how much we're going to stick with that mentality. Pete Carroll's not going anywhere. He is more than the head coach. It is a monopoly in Seattle, which is why I've been an advocate saying that we need to move off Pete Carroll since before it was a popular opinion, since well before the Russell Wilson deal. He sees that in Seattle, and he's like, that's that old Bill O'Brien, trade away my best players for second-round picks and some formerly hot talent. And DeAndre Hopkins trade for a second-round pick and David Johnson, right? He doesn't want that type of scenario. He's seen some of the moves Seattle's been making. I think that we're fine moving away from Deshaun Watson. And Steezy, you brought up some great points as well. Well, yes, there are going to be a couple years down the line, 3 and 4 years down the line, where we're paying him in the low 30s in terms of his cap hit. But the year before that, 2 years from now, it's going to be a $37 million cap hit. And that's a lot of money for a team that's taken a lot of dead cap with Russell Wilson. So I can understand why we're not necessarily the best fit there. And I actually have a draft prospect that I really think would be a good fit, and it's not the ones people are talking about, but we'll get into that.
Ooh, intriguing. I'm curious myself. But before we continue, my brother, I would like to welcome two lovely ladies, hosts of the Pacific Northwest Showdown on any place you can find podcasts, YouTube as well. They have a really big following on Twitter, especially when it pertains to Seahawks Twitter. I mean, man, I don't know if it gets any better than them. They're very insightful, very knowledgeable, and I think it's safe to say that I'm very honored to have these two show up. Please welcome Michaela and Kay of the PNW podcast, Pacific Northwest Showdown podcast.
How's it going?
Hey.
Good. How you guys doing?
Good.
We're doing well.
Good.
So, no, thank you for having us on the show. There's obviously a lot to unpack with Deshaun Watson rejecting, which I just found funny. You might have seen my tweets about it. I'm like, good, it's fine. Like,
right.
I'm totally cool with that. It's the best rejection I've ever received in my life.
Yes, thank you. Happy to move on. Thank you so much.
But there's a lot of options out there, and I don't think, as you mentioned, I think that there are options out there that can keep us going, especially with next season right now as it stands, depending on how all of these deals go down this free agency, 140 under the cap, right, for next season. So depending on how they choose to spend now, then it could really benefit us next season.
Yeah.
And depending on who they invest in. And so I'm thinking, Gardner Minshew, 2.5 million cap hit this season.
Yeah.
He's had starting experience. His win-loss ratio doesn't really show his other stats with his touchdown to interception. It's 41, I think, to 12 or something over the last 3 years of his touchdown to interception ratio. So when you compare that to Drew Lock, who we are currently rostering with the Russell Wilson trade, Drew Lock over the last 3 seasons has 25 touchdowns to 20 interceptions. And I was, looking at the highlight reels and stuff, and I'm thinking, man, some of those passes that he completed could have been interceptions.
Yeah.
They were very contested catches. So that's concerning for me. I don't think Drew Lock is the answer here. And so do they go and get Marcus Mariota? Jameis Winston is intriguing to me if the Saints do land Deshaun Watson. And that's because Jameis Winston, after he sat behind Drew Brees there for that season, and he came in before he got injured last season, they were starting to see a turnaround in him. He wasn't turning over the ball as much. You know, he got that LASIK eye surgery and people were saying that now he has,
He can see.
better vision.
Yeah.
He can see. So it will be interesting to see what the Seahawks decide to do. I'm also very intrigued by Malik Willis and potentially, just going in the draft and snagging a new young quarterback to develop.
Yeah.
Something that we said on the Pacific Northwest Showdown podcast this week is that Pete Carroll is a college coach.
Yeah.
He is very used to having guys come through every turnover every 4 years. So what could he do in his, I say he has maybe 3 years left for, I think his contract's through 2025. So it will be interesting to see how that pans out. He could definitely get a young roster and make it something in the next 3 to 4 years.
And I love the idea of Gardner Minshew personally, because I think he has great skill and talent potential, but I think he also brings such a great energy to things. And I think Seattle fans could really latch on to that. And so whether it be a permanent solution or not, I don't know, but I think I just love the idea of the mustache mania and all that showing up. So yeah.
Yeah. So what are your guys' thoughts on our thoughts? Because I'm curious. I kind of have a different take than Noah, I think,
Michaela's
a little bit.
Thoughts.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of Noah, I just wanted to say, Squabo, Noah, please. This is Michaela on the right, and this is Kate on the left, and then Kate and Michaela. This is my good friend, my good brother, Squabo. No, Noah, okay, aka Squabo. Good friend of mine. He's actually one of the biggest reasons why I'm even in the YouTube game to begin with. So a whole lot of credit, a whole lot of shout outs to him, whole lot of love goes out to him. As to answer your question though, look, I agree. There's plenty of guys to go out there. There's still a Jameis Winston. There's still a Marcus Mariota. And I'm of the mindset of potentially drafting a Malik Willis. Maybe not at number 9 overall. Maybe you move back to, let's say, 12, 13, 14, 15. You accumulate picks in the process. You still pair him up with the bridge quarterback. You don't necessarily have to start him right away. And then maybe go into year 2, we can kind of put him in the same situation as a Trey Lance. You trade away the veteran guy that started the year prior, and then he kind of comes in with all these expectations, with all this potential. And that's why you still want to keep around a DK Metcalf and a Tyler Lockett. I know a lot of people are saying, let's just rebuild, all the way, trade both those guys, but we need receivers. We need talent, for our next quarterback. And so I totally do not subscribe to that notion. Squabo, what say you?
Well, I agree with, first of all, I go to Washington State, so I love Gardner Minshew. I think that's a good option, but I'm hearing things. He is probably going to the Colts, right? So that's what I'm hearing about that whole scenario. About Malik Willis, I agree. He has a lot of upside. He has great mobility. His play action and throw under pressure are phenomenal. His deep ball can be electric. And when he throws it, when he's under pressure, I've seen some of the YouTube highlights. I didn't watch him last year. Okay. I'm going to be clear about that. But from the YouTube highlights, he looks really good at times. He struggles at going through his progression, though. And he's a first read and then a run type of a guy. So players like that aren't as successful in the NFL as those who run only when they have to. See RG3. I've heard that and I can't word this any better than the way that I heard it said. I've heard that he reads his receivers rather than the safeties. And that's part of the problem. His eyes leave something to be desired. His reading of the defensive coverage, a lot of times he gets into this mode and he'll spin out of a tackle and he'll make a crazy play when there's an even better play that he leaves on the table. And that's what my concern is with him. So I'll tell you this, he is not the main quarterback prospect I want Seattle to go after, but I do think he is legit.
Wow. Okay. Well, if you're not a Malik Willis fan, is there a guy in free agency that maybe you like as a potential bridge quarterback?
Drew Lock. He's already our bridge. We got our bridge. We have our bridge. Now we need to get our guy long term. We need to find a guy in this year's draft. And in Seattle, we're not known for going after, at least in the Pete Carroll regime, we've never gone after a quarterback early. So I'm looking in the second round, third round, a day 2 kind of a guy that has so much upside and that not enough people are talking about.
Who is it?
Okay. Let's get into it. So
I'm curious.
First, if you don't mind, I would like to go over some of the popular names and why they might not be the fit, right? Because people are talking a lot about Matt Corral out of Ole Miss, 6'0", 200 pounds. He throws darts. And if you look at the tape, he is electric. 20-5 touchdown interception ratio, 68% completion, accuracy and quick release are major pluses. But he doesn't have the arm strength of other prospects in this draft. And I want a big arm guy. Corral is a good backup option, but he's not who I'm going after. Desmond Ridder of Cincinnati. We saw him in the college football playoffs. 38 touchdown interception ratio. His problem is his accuracy. And there are too many times throughout a game where he throws a pass that just sails to nobody. And those are a lot more dangerous in the NFL because players are faster and can get to where the ball is defensively. So his 65 completion percentage last year wasn't good enough for me, and his 55% 2 years ago is not even close to good enough. NFL defenders only get closer. Kenny Pickett is another name that a lot of people are talking about, and he is another reasonable option. Look, he's good at going through his progression. He leaves the pocket too early, though, and that's one of my biggest problems. He leaves it too early. Others will knock his hand size. If Pickett starts, I don't know if you know this, but he will be the only starter with under 9-inch hands. Taysom Hill is another guy. If he starts, he would be in that category. But right now, he's not the starter, at least, especially if Deshaun Watson ends up going there. So Pickett did have a very nice touchdown interception ratio, but I don't want someone that's going to leave the pocket too early, especially coming after a guy like Russell Wilson. And how if we see someone scrambling out some of the cringiest plays of Russell Wilson's career when he scrambled a little bit too early and forced the protection to break down. The guy, I've teased y'all enough. The guy that I'm going after, that I want to see Seattle go after on day 2, either trade back in the second, because I think we could even trade back from the 40 and 41st picks. Trade back in the second. I want a guy who he does have cartilage issues in his knee. He's had surgery, or at least that's what's been reported. So I'm hoping that gets better. This is a very sizable individual. This is very contrast to Russell Wilson. So 6'4", 224. I want someone that's going to stand in the pocket strong, like Carson Strong out of Nevada. Not very mobile, but that's why his eyes are so good. He scrambles to pass, not to run. I was watching some of the tape on this guy and saw him throw the ball 65 yards into double coverage without thinking twice. Not even, no stress about it, just heaves it. No effort, looks seamless. Touchdown, bomb. Pass interference, they still caught it because of where he put the basket, the football. Heavily covered, he'll put the ball in the basket. He steps up in the pocket and knows how to thread the needle. 36-8 touchdown interception ratio in 12 games last year in the Mountain West Conference. Carson Strong is the guy I look for in Seattle. Not afraid to hand the ball off. Very good in the pocket. Very good with his protection because he doesn't have that mobility to rely on. That's why I say Carson Strong should be the next quarterback in Seattle.
Okay.
Steezy, you're muted, brother.
Oops, my bad. My bad. No, I was just gonna ask Michaela, Kate, do you guys have a rebuttal?
You know, we did talk about Carson Strong a little bit this week in the podcast, and you know, somebody asked like, where do you see Seattle wanting to select Carson Strong? And the cartilage issue with his knee is a concern, right? That's one of the largest concerns is longevity. Health-wise, when you're selecting people in the draft. Now, had he not had the knee issue, he's had surgery twice on it, and he's 22 years old, so he's still young. It's not to say that his knee won't hold up. He's saying that it will, and that if I think that he had to get cartilage from a cadaver or something, and that it hasn't rejected it at this point.
Which
is good. He's like, if it would have been rejected, it would have rejected it at this point. It's obviously a concern, but if he does fall deep enough in the draft, and if Seattle decides that they're going to focus on other positions of need and he's there, and it's late second round, third round, snag him and see what could happen, right? Like I'm not opposed to it by any means. But just don't reach for him, I guess is what I would say. I wouldn't reach for him if he's there later in the later rounds and Seattle still doesn't have a quarterback that they feel confident in and that they haven't selected prior to. 100%. But yeah, so we did talk about that, and I would say that's the only concern is, I mean, he would have to stay in the pocket and rely on the pass protection.
Yeah.
And that means that Seattle really needs to booster the offensive line.
O-line.
Granted, how much of the offensive line issues came from Wilson deciding to scramble too early? And that's kind of an interesting thought to think about.
No doubt. As it pertains to the quarterback situation in Seattle, who's to say that we had to target a quarterback this year? I mean, there is still the NFL draft next year. There is still a Bryce Young, potentially a CJ Stroud, a JT Daniels. There's plenty of quarterbacks to go after. There's plenty of different directions, plenty of different avenues to go. Michaela and Kate, you guys, let's say you guys are sitting in John Schneider's GM chair. You have $50+ million in cap space. This offseason, you know that Deshaun Watson's off the table. Are you going after a Jameis or a Marcus Mariota and hoping to pair him alongside a top 5, top 3 pick in the draft next year? Or are you going to shoot for a quarterback this year? What are you guys doing?
We have to be intentional about who you select, because if I would say that if you selected, or if you went after a guy like Jameis Winston, I think that you could potentially be winning games, especially if you bolster your other positions. I think that he's a decent quarterback. So I don't think you would be able to necessarily select, you know, a high first round pick, depending on where your draft pick falls come next season. If you're going for someone like Jameis, if you keep somebody like Drew Lock, I think that you have a shot at doing that. But that's also just my opinion on that. So I'm all for, I like to win, right? So I'm saying get the best possible person that you can right now. You want to be able to retain players. I'm not somebody that likes to tank for picks.
Yeah, no.
Like, I want to win. So get the best guys that you can this season and see what you can do, and then adjust as need be down the road. And I get that it requires to be thinking long term about who you're investing in, how many years, how does that hit the cap space later down the road. But you got to put together the best possible team of who's wanting and willing to come.
And I think, like, too, you know, you have to actually like have some of those resources that quarterbacks are going to need. Like, you need a good offensive line. You need to like make sure that player, like that quarterback position, is protected and things like that. So I think we have some potential this season with kind of trying to, like you were saying, bolster up some of those other spots that are in need, so that, you know, if we do, or if they, because I mean, I guess it'd be us if we're sitting in that seat, but if we do decide to go a route of like not trying to get that franchise quarterback this season, that we can actually get some tools to help support that person when we do decide to bring them in, which I think we need a lot.
And I'll be honest, I don't think that the franchise quarterback's happening this season. If they get lucky and they draft somebody that's like a complete hit, like nobody thought Russell Wilson, when they selected him in the 3rd round at 75 overall, was going to be our franchise quarterback. They had just gotten Matt Flynn, right? So it could be a hit. I'm not saying that it's impossible, but I think it will be a couple-year process to really determine, unless they make a large trade for a quarterback, just like the Rams did to get Matthew Stafford, just like Denver just did to get Russell Wilson. If you're in the position where you do bolster all these other positions and you're in a good spot to then go after that franchise quarterback and you're in a win now mode, then you could potentially decide like that's what we're going after. But at this point in time, it really is a process of who's going to be that transition quarterback, or are we going to get really lucky and hit in the draft? And that's what I think at this point.
No doubt. Squabo, I want to ask you, let's say Seattle decides to start a Drew Lock and then, you know, they decide to tank next year. How hard is it going to be to watch Seahawks games next year? Brother, you're on mute.
For the Steez. Hey, it's not gonna be too much worse than this year, right? Like, ever since Wilson got hurt, it was like I don't know about the end of the season. I don't know. I'm a Laker fan too, and so it's kind of like watching the Lakers last year in the playoffs against Phoenix. I don't know if y'all watch basketball. Last year in the playoff against Phoenix, it was like when AD's back, when AD's back, we're gonna be fine. When he gets healthy, when Anthony Davis gets healthy, They call him Street Clothes Davis for a reason. And that's kind of what it was last year when Wilson was hurt. We lost a lot of faith, and we kind of knew that our season was over to a certain extent as we lost game after game after game and then shut out. That's what it's going to feel like. I predicted we go, 5-13? I think that's how the math adds up now. So I think we'll win about 5 games, and we will be in the conversation for a top quarterback prospect if it is Drew Lock all year long. Speak of the devil.
My goodness. Okay, so let's just say we do finish with the terrible record. We're in contention for the number 1 overall pick in the draft. We're not going to have a horse in the race come playoff time. And I know he might be enemy number 1 in the eyes of some fans, maybe a lot of fans. But would I be wrong to root for the Denver Broncos? Michaela and Kay, how are you guys feeling about that? If Denver, let's say that they make a deep playoff run, let's say they're in the Super Bowl. I know the Chargers are stacked, but let's say Denver, is in the Super Bowl. Are we wrong for maybe rooting for Russell Wilson?
Oh, no. I mean, I honestly, if the Seahawks aren't there and Russell Wilson is with the Broncos, I'm all for it. Like, honestly, I have a lot of questions regarding this whole transition and how it was run, and feeling like, there's just lots of questions around what actually happened between the Seattle Seahawks and Russell Wilson and who made the decision to want to move on. It's really kind of feeling like that was Russell's decision at the end of the day, and what people say, but versus what people do. Regardless of all that, like, I have no hard feelings. This is a quarterback that gave us 10 years, that gave us an opportunity to watch playoff games for, I want to say, like 8 or 9 of those years, and who got us a Super Bowl win. I have no hard feelings about, like, Russell Wilson potentially going somewhere else and thriving or getting another Super Bowl ring. So he's given a lot to this community in Seattle. I'm really grateful for the things that he's done for this community and for Children's Hospital and the cancer patients there, the kids. He's done a lot of good work. So if it came down to it, now, if it was up against the Seahawks, I would really hope that we have, another top defense, and that we shut them down like we did for the Super Bowl we won against the Broncos. So that would be really fun to watch, to be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, no hard feelings there.
Yeah. I'm learning it's a business, and I'm trying to take some of the emotion out of it, but it's hard. I always say #learning sports, because I'm new to all of this in a lot of ways. So I tend to be a little more emotional about some of the stuff than Michaela. She's a little more pragmatic, but I mean, if he's there, good for him, right? Like, we're trying to, cheer him on anyway, I guess. But yeah, I'll go with Michaela being the overall answer on this one, because I don't want to say anything that's wrong.
You should say whatever you want.
I don't know. It felt like a breakup where you're the friend on the outside that just can't get the story from either side. And you're just I don't know, I can't really pick a side because I don't know what happened or what the deal was. So it feels a little just extra messy. So then it's kind of I don't want to make anybody I don't want to hurt sides or hurt feelings. And I don't know any of these people.
Or
so really it doesn't matter. But yeah, it's you don't know what goes on behind closed doors in a relationship, romantically or obviously with sports and all this. So hopefully everybody's just kind of better off where they are, and that it'll be some good things will happen for everybody. Let's just go with that.
No doubt. I know you guys are very busy women, and so this will be the final question I do want to get out of you guys before you guys go. Again, thank you so much for joining us, and a lovely background, by the way. That Russell Wilson picture right behind you, Michaela. I mean, wow, that's phenomenal. Can we get a little close up on that, if at all possible? Hold on. Let the fans see. Ooh.
Nope, sorry. I'm going all sorts of ways.
No, you're good. It's
not as easy as it looks when you hold a computer up and then you're just trying to wave it around everybody.
I apologize. I didn't realize. But while you guys are at it, at the Pacific Northwest Showdown on Twitter, all social media platforms, please give them a follow. But like I said, Michaela and Matt, before you guys go, I got to ask, do you trust Pete Carroll?
That's a loaded question.
That's a big, for me, just being everybody should be happy. I will say he's who we have. So I feel we sort of don't have any other choice than to just kind of be all right, it's in your hands. good luck to everybody involved, and hopefully some correct decisions are made. But
here's who I
Yeah.
trust. Here's who I trust. I trust the players that are opting to come back that are solid leaders in our locker room.
Yeah.
And that is Quandre Diggs, right?
Oh,
I
yeah.
was super
So
concerned this last week that with the decisions to move Russell Wilson, a franchise quarterback that
Yeah.
over the last however many years you think would be a huge attractive component for players to decide to continue or to move in
Mhm.
free agency to go play with the Seahawks. And for Quandre Diggs to come back, to me is a huge indicator. You got Disley coming back, we
Yes.
got Sidney Jones coming
Mhm.
back, we got Al Woods coming back, and so the fact that the Seahawks are locking in some of those players
Yeah.
that were free agents on their own team this season, to me that makes me feel like, okay, if they're trusting in the Seahawks franchise, if they're trusting the fact that Pete Carroll's still their head coach and that John Schneider is going to go out there and gonna figure it out
Mhm.
over the next, Diggs is for 3 years, right? That's a 3-year contract. If they can trust it, I'm gonna trust it.
Yeah.
And so that's where I'll
That
leave
makes
things
sense.
off.
Mhm.
You're on mute, man.
Hey, I'm still new to all this, so I apologize, you guys.
No
I just
worries.
wanted to add Pete Carroll. Look, he's won literally everywhere he's been. College. I know with the Jets he didn't win, and so I didn't forget about that. But he has, oversaw plenty of programs and kind of built programs from the ground up. And so I guess if I'm to answer my own question, I do have a little bit of faith. Maybe lately he hasn't inspired as much confidence. But look, like you guys said, I thought you guys put it out there brilliantly. We're stuck with him. And he also, it wasn't just Russell Wilson. He's also brought Super Bowls to Seattle. And I know it's been a while, but that's still something we can't hold on to. Not a lot of teams could say that. And so I like you guys' answer. Before you guys go, though, Squabo, did you have any last words for them?
Hey, pleasure to meet y'all.
Nice to meet you.
I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like I knew about y'all before this whole thing. Steezy put in a great word about you both. You're both highly intelligent individuals. Like, you both blew my minds away with some of the stats and information you brought to the table. Pleasure to meet both of you.
You
You as
too.
well, yeah.
Go Cougs, by the way.
Hey, go
Coug alum.
Cougs.
So there you go.
Okay. So
Coug by marriage.
She went to Gonzaga, so
They don't have football.
Close
The
enough.
basketball team's real good.
I mean, yeah. I went to like half of a game freshman year, and it was the preseason, and then I was like, this is a lot. I'll just watch it on TV. It's totally fine.
And did you say you married into the Cougs?
Yeah, married a Coug. So
Oh,
There we
see,
go.
you obviously have great taste. I see. I love
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, it worked out.
yep, exactly.
Hey,
Well, thank
I
you
don't
for
currently
having
attend
us.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying thank you for having us.
Oh, no
it's been a great night joining
Of course.
you guys.
Shout out the podcast. Any socials, any plugs, put it out
Yeah,
there.
so
Let people
go
know.
follow us on at Pacific Northwest Showdown. So that's PNW Showdown. We're on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. We're kind of on, but not very much.
We exist. There we go.
And then if you wanted to follow each of us, you can go follow me at Michaela Mattis. So it's MIKAELA MATTES. And
then I'm at Kate Skis, which is KATESKEES. But if you can't remember that, go to Michaela's, and then you can get to me from there.
from the bio, you'll find
Yeah.
my wife. So very awesome. Thank you so much.
No, hey, Kate, Michaela, thank you guys so much for coming on short notice. I know I hit you guys up probably just a couple of hours prior to this. There'll be plenty of other discussion roundtables that hopefully we'll partake in together in the future.
Yeah.
But hopefully today is the start of something to come. Thank you guys so much again. Pacific Northwest Showdown podcast, all platforms, YouTube. Make sure to get at them on Twitter. They're huge in the Seahawks Twitter following, and so definitely get at them for all your Seahawks news and whatnot. Again, thank you guys so much, and hope you guys have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Of course. Squab. My brother, it won't just be us two. We're going to have another special guest joining us very, very shortly. Matter of fact, I might as well just introduce him right now. He's a huge fantasy football guy. I mean, my gosh, on Instagram, almost 100K. So I know a lot of y'all play fantasy football. For the best fantasy football advice in the world, please follow fantasy.footballexpert on Instagram. Get ready. I know we're early. It's early, but it's never too early to study up on the next fantasy year, especially for those of you guys that play in Dynasty. a good friend of ours. I think we met him through NorbCam, and so shout out to NorbCam for that connection. Currently attends the University of Arizona, and so he's a scholar. Don't forget that. I think, if I'm not mistaken, also does a little bit of work for Fantasy Pros. And so for all my fantasy football fans out there, please welcome Mr. Ari Kozlow.
Hi, how are you?
How you doing, Ari?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Bro, of course. Hey, thank you so much for hopping on, bro. And Squabble, you've met Ari before, have you?
Hey. Yeah, no, we've chopped it up a little bit. Hey, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, bro, before we get into to the thick of things, Ari, do you want to shout yourself out real quick, my brother?
Yeah, you can follow me at fantasy.footballexpert on Instagram, and I recently started up a podcast. I know Squabble, you'll know him. One of my good friends, Korea. We recently started a sports podcast. You can find that AKP Sports Talk on YouTube. And yeah.
How you know Korea? How you know?
I've just since like first grade. I grew up in Bellevue with him, going to school like basically my whole since first grade, basically.
Wow. It really is a small world. I got multiple classes with Korea. Korea's on the student-run radio station with me, or he was until he graduated. So he's a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
It is a small world, they say. Although when you look at the fact that there's almost 8 billion people in the world, sometimes you wonder how you come across, how that person and that person and that person and that person. Real quick though, before we get into the thick of things yet again, I do want to address some of y'all in the super chat or in the comment section. I know I haven't talked to any of you guys yet. I see you guys' comments though. I'm not ignoring y'all. Esteban Soto, I can't lie, I was a little disappointed about that Watson report, although I haven't seen anything official yet. I say we go get Minshew. I think Minshew would be a very intriguing option at quarterback. My guy Kyle, what's going on, bro? Thank you so much for tuning in. Dev Peterson, hey, I didn't forget about you, bro. Thank you so much. Diego, hey, what's up? How you doing, bro? My man, Fantasy Football Hustler, hope you're doing well, bro. Thank you for joining us. I know you're a very, very busy man, so anytime that you're spending out of your time with us, I don't take that for granted. My guy Larry, what's going on, bro? I'm gonna address the rest of you guys throughout. I do want to get to some of the topics though, just to respect Squabbo and Ari's time. Ari, I didn't get your take. Deshaun Watson has reportedly rejected the Seattle Seahawks as a potential trade partner, and now it's starting to look like it's down to either the Saints or the Panthers. What do you make of the news? Are you disappointed? Were you of the mindset that Seattle should have brought in a Deshaun Watson? What say you?
I mean, I can't say I was surprised. I think partly I know you guys were talking about, with Pete Carroll's run first defensive mind. I think that paired with kind of how we've seen certain players leave the organization, most recently Bobby Wagner, Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas. I think, I hate to say it, part of all of that and how they left after doing all that they did isn't going to be a place I think where people want to be. So I think kind of a combination of all of that, like part of me wanted him to come to Seattle. Like, I don't think any fan wants to like go into a real rebuild. But I can't say I was like surprised.
Okay. And so I just got to ask, because we're on it, Saints or Panthers, or do you have another team? Where do you see Deshaun Watson going?
Yeah, I think between the two, I mean, obviously there's a lot of question marks with the Saints with their cap situation. Obviously, you can always kind of find ways to get out of that with like restructuring contracts and releasing players. And then obviously you have Michael Thomas, who's coming off, I don't even think he played at all last season, if I'm not mistaken. Then you had the Alvin Kamara legal situation. So there's a lot of unknowns in New Orleans. But then you have the Panthers, obviously, with DJ Moore and Christian McCaffrey. I think I kind of would rather see him go to Carolina. It's kind of weird because last year there's a report that said that he would reject a trade to Carolina. Obviously, a lot changes over the course of a year. But I mean, I heard that he rejected, or he would reject trades from every other team. So it sounds like it is down to those two, is what I heard as well. And I think both of them would be, interesting landing spots, but I think Carolina is kind of where I would rather see him go.
Okay, just because I introduced you as the fantasy football expert, which you very well are, I got to ask, from a fantasy football perspective, where do you think is the best destination for Deshaun Watson as it pertains to fantasy football?
Yeah, that's kind of where that's kind of more of the reasoning I was giving Carolina is, I mean, obviously both of them have different weapons, but I feel like there's more unknown with New Orleans, like I was saying, with Michael Thomas's injuries the last couple of years, and then Kamara's legal situation, which, to be honest, I have no idea what's going on with that, or if anything is going on with that. But then you also had Carolina reportedly fielding trade offers for Christian McCaffrey. Who knows if that was legit or not? But I think if the offenses remain the same for both teams, I think Carolina is where I'd rather see him go.
Okay. Squad, before you go, I just want to say Deshaun Watson, I do want to remind you guys, Deshaun Watson does have a no trade clause. And so I don't know if he's going to prioritize winning. I don't know if he's going to prioritize, being in a more low-key city, just because we do know that whatever team he signs with, or I guess I don't want to say we know this for a fact, but I just have a feeling that whatever team ends up bringing a Deshaun Watson on board, they're going to take a hit PR-wise. There's a lot of people, even though Deshaun Watson has been cleared of all criminal charges, he can't be charged as a criminal. A lot of people are still kind of against him. A lot of people kind of think that his image and his reputation has been stained, and it's going to take time, and it's going to take a whole lot of years for him to fully recover. I know it might not be entirely his fault, especially if he is, at the end of the day, innocent, and so his reputation has always been tarnished. But me personally, I think the Saints offer a better chance at winning just because they have a formula, right? They have an elite defense. They have elite weapons. Michael Thomas recently restructured his contract, and so I don't think he's going to go anywhere. Alvin Kamara will most likely face maybe a 4-game suspension, but it's not like he's going to be gone for the entire year. Carolina, they have an unproven head coach. They have their best pass rusher just left in free agency. Stephon Gilmore is probably not going to come back, and I just think that the Saints are better suited to help him compete. Squabbo, between those two teams, do you see him landing anywhere in the NFC South, or do you have a team on the outside and where Deshaun Watson could potentially land?
Unfortunately, what it's come down to, it really does sound like it's between those two teams. First of all, obviously they don't want to trade. The Houston Texans they don't want to trade Deshaun Watson anywhere in that division. They've already canceled the Indianapolis Colts. I'm sure everybody heard about that. Additionally, they're not going to want to trade within their conference if they can help it. And with so many great quarterbacks over there right now, there's not too many teams that are in need. One of the teams is the Cleveland Browns, but Deshaun Watson probably would decline that offer and not want to go there. You look at the NFC, and the NFC, another team that a lot of people have talked about as needing a quarterback that just traded for one in Carson Wentz, was the Washington Commanders. That's so weird to say still. But the fact that their organization, with the allegations and what's been found about them and the former ownership, and so how all that was handled, now they can't afford another stain in their repertoire, in their locker room. So I don't think that would have been a good fit anyways. So it really is down to what you were talking about, Carolina and New Orleans, in my opinion. And between those two teams, well, you have to look at their offensive lines, because one of the biggest storylines in Deshaun Watson's career was how much he was getting sacked early on in his career. His rookie season, he was out for multiple games and his season was over due to an ACL tear. Outside of that, he's been able to stay healthy for the most part, but still take some of the most sacks in the NFL. Well, last year, Pro Football Focus ranked the Saints offensive line 18th. Doesn't sound great. Not the worst in the NFL. The Carolina Panthers were ranked 31st out of 32 NFL teams. So their offensive line was horrible. And y'all remember, if you watched any Panthers games, Sam Darnold, Cam Newton, didn't matter who was going in at quarterback. What was the PJ Walker, the third guy out of Temple with Matt Rule and the XFL? None of them were able to get any time in the pocket, and that's going to be a big concern. We know heading into this offseason, the Saints left tackle Teron Armstead is an unrestricted free agent. It's the only free agent on that offensive line, though, that was ranked 18th. So if they can bring him back or get another left tackle, that's a great option. Also have to consider the head coach change for the New Orleans Saints, now Dennis Allen. Excuse me. The Panthers, on the other hand, have reportedly brought in Austin Corbett, the guard from the Los Angeles Rams. Still don't have any contract details, but Spotrac is telling me he's already a part of the Carolina Panthers. Matt Paradis, however you pronounce his last name, he is also a free agent. That's their center. So if the Panthers make some sort of deal where they promise that they're going to restructure their offensive line, or if Deshaun Watson is able to talk to some guys and be like, hey, if I go to Carolina, you're going to come with me, right? Unless that's able to happen, I think the answer is New Orleans because he's learned his lesson about great weaponry versus great protection. And I think protection is going to be the priority. If he were to go to either team as the roster currently stands, New Orleans is my answer.
I love that answer. I mean, Squab, like I always say, like we always say, great minds think alike. And, you know, I'm pretty sure we're not the only two people on that Saints train. But as for another quarterback, though, in a Gardner Minshew, are you okay with the Gardner Minshew potentially being traded to Seattle just because I think maybe a mid-round pick would get it done? Are you opposed to that idea, or what do you make of that?
Now, I'm hearing he's going to the Colts.
Oh, okay.
So I don't think he's going to be on the table.
Okay.
But, of course, I'm open to it. Hey, let him compete with Drew Lock. So when competition is everything in this locker room right now, who's competing? Drew Lock and Geno. That is one of the most boring competitions that nobody is signing up to watch. Bringing in Gardner Minshew at least adds some spice. At least adds the stash, right? Like it brings the pizzazz, the swagger back. Gardner can come in and have 3-4 hot weeks in a row and just go off and throw for 4 touchdowns a week. Only have like 3 interceptions over the whole stretch and do some crazy good things for Seattle. If we're really trying to compete, I'm totally for bringing in Gardner Minshew. I think that as long as it's not a lot of compensation in the deal, once again, I think he's going to Indy. But if we were to trade for him, I wouldn't give up more than a 5th.
Ari?
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't say I'm totally against Minshew. I mean, personally, I feel like I know you guys have talked about guys like Mariota and Winston a little bit earlier, and I feel like the only issue I have is I feel like they might be like too good in the way where they might hinder the Seahawks from getting a top 5, top 7 pick or whatever for the 2023 draft. And I feel like we would kind of be stuck in no man's land where we would be, you know, maybe close to 500, just under 500. So that's my only reason why I might say no to Minshew is not anything against him, but it's because I feel like the Seahawks wouldn't really go anywhere with him. I feel like they would just kind of be in the middle of the league, middle of the first round. And so that's why, even though I don't like Drew Lock, that's why I'm kind of hoping that they stick with him this year, is because I think he will be the biggest. I think he's the best option to get that top 5 pick for our Bryce Young or CJ Stroud for the 2023 draft. But I know you guys have talked a lot about Malik Willis, and he's a guy I'm kind of interested in this year if they do go quarterback this year. But I think, you know, it's safe to say that this is going to be the first year in a long time where the NFL draft is actually going to be of interest as a Seahawks fan.
All right. I think enough talking about quarterbacks. We've been talking about quarterbacks way too much. We've gone almost 50 minutes, or we've been live for almost 50 minutes, and none of us have talked about any of the free agents that Seattle has re-signed. I thought that today has been a very big win for Seattle. I mean, you bring back a Quandre Diggs, you bring back a Sidney Jones on a below market deal, you bring back maybe slightly overpaid. I know a lot of fans have been complaining. Will Dissly, you bring back an Al Woods, and now the next order of business, DJ Reed, Rashad Penny. What's your guys' initial reaction to some of the moves? What were some of your best re-signings? Squab, I'm going to start with you. And were there any signings or re-signings in where you were just like, what was that?
Quandre Diggs and Al Woods, definitely the best 2 free agent re-signings to this point. Quandre Diggs, I've been all over this. He is the most important free agent that we had to re-sign, and there are a lot of reasons why. Part of the reason is because he's led our team in takeaways the past 2 years as a defender. He's had 5 both years, and he has led us to victories in that sense in ways that other players on our defense have not. Additionally, when we go and we mortgage our entire future at the time for Jamal Adams, and in the box safety, practically a linebacker, he's trying to make linebacker type of money as well because of how much he plays in the box. If we're going to bring in a safety like that, and we're not going to disguise this year, we're hoping to disguise more what we're doing in our secondary. But last year we weren't. And so to have a single high safety, the way that Seattle loves to do, cover 1, cover 3, Quandre Diggs has so much range. He's electric. He lights people up. He can get his hands on the football, and he gets turnovers. So because of what he means in covering for Jamal Adams and making that deal more acceptable, I think that was a spectacular deal. Al Woods, he's been a monster on the interior, just blowing plays up. He gets better every single time I see him on the field. Al Woods is a game wrecker at times for Seattle. He's not consistent as a game wrecker, but he showed more consistency this year than I've seen. So I definitely love that re-signing of Al Woods. Will Dissly, you talk about it. And we had better be bringing him in for some blocking purposes. His stats have not been what we wanted them to be. His stats have not been what we expected, but that's partially because we got such high expectations when he started out so strong before getting injured both of his first 2 years in the NFL. But I look at a guy that I'm going for in the draft, Carson Strong, and we talked about it. Carson Strong's tight end last year, Cole Turner, had 62 receptions, 677 yards, and 10 touchdowns, averaging 11 yards per reception for Nevada. We just traded for Noah Fant in return for Russell Wilson. We're re-signing Will Dissly. I say we're paying him a little too much, $8 million per year. It's acceptable if he stays healthy and he's doing that, providing us that blocking that we need, and we're able to run those 2 tight end sets. We're set at tight end, but we need a quarterback that's going to utilize those tight ends. That's also why I say we should go with Carson Strong.
All right, Ari, best re-signing of the day. Actually, sorry, let me address your comments. Squab, I got to jump off what you were saying about Quandre Diggs. Not only has he been Seattle's takeaway leader the last couple of years, like I addressed in my Quandre Diggs episode from about a couple of weeks ago, Seattle has had 40 takeaways in the last 2 years. Quandre Diggs has 10 of them. So you're telling me that he's responsible for that 25% of Seattle's takeaways in the last 2 years? And we're talking about a team that finished last year 25th in the NFL in takeaways. Even if you take into account the broken leg and the dislocated ankle, did you guys really think that Seattle was going to let a safety who complements Jamal Adams so well, who's our best ball hawk, did you guys really think he was going to go? And I didn't think that was feasible at all. And so I wasn't surprised in that we didn't franchise tag him. I knew that deal was going to get done. You know, we don't have a leader anymore. I know Bobby Wagner kind of appointed Jordan Brooks, but better believe it, Quandre Diggs is going to be the heart and soul of this defense moving forward. I know it might not be ideal to pay 2 safeties about $40 million when you combine, both of their salaries. But again, Quandre Diggs complements what Jamal Adams does well. And in my personal estimation, Quandre Diggs is the most underrated safety in football. Ari, am I tripping in that statement? And 2, best signing. 3, worst re-signing. Excuse me.
No, yeah, I'm in complete agreement with you both in regards to Diggs. I mean, I think he was going to get that payday, and then he had the brutal injury to end last season. And so, yeah, definitely a much-deserved payday for Quandre Diggs. I'm definitely in agreement that Will Dissly was a bit of an overpay, but when you look at Noah Fant as a player, he's not so much of a blocker, he's more of a receiver. And so I think Dissly, that duo will be good. And I agree that if Dissly does stay healthy, the deal in the end, can be fine. And, with the way the Seahawks are trending, I'm sure we'll get into this, but I don't really see them paying what I think Rashad Penny is going to cost in this market. And so I think, at some point the Seahawks have to spend some money this offseason. And so I think that this was kind of part of that. And obviously, with every position, with all these crazy deals, look at what Christian Kirk got and all of that. The market is high at every position at the end of the day. And so I think that's kind of what it came down to.
Okay, well, Seattle is known for not really, hopping on the first wave or the second wave of free agency. Do you guys see that changing? Are there any sort of free agents that you feel like Seattle can still attain, could still possibly target? Or are we going to focus on Rashad Penny, on a DJ Reed, and maybe not look to the outside, maybe look to the draft? Squabble, what do you think?
I think Pete Carroll is on, I don't want to say borrowed time, but it's getting close. When you move off a quarterback like Russell Wilson, who you've never had a winning season without him. Now you have another losing season this upcoming year without Russell Wilson. You're not going to look too great. And so I think Seattle, a little bit of the Tom Brady, Bill Belichick. Brady leaves, starts inviting friends. Hey, I'll take less money. Let's make this thing work. I don't know if Russell Wilson's going to take less money because he don't want to do that here. But I know on the other side of it, Belichick was trying to bring in a whole, hey, come on, let's bring in everybody, anybody. You want to learn about this New England offense, this defense? I'll tell you everything you need to know. Just come over here and we'll sign you to a deal. That's what I'm starting to feel is coming with this Pete Carroll thing. He's not just going to make a move like this. When you do a move like this, you know your franchise, especially a franchise like Seattle, where we're not the biggest in the league, and we get very attached to the people that we love the most. Russ Wilson was a hero, the biggest name in Seattle sports, now gone. You got to make moves after that if you want to get any of this fan base back to supporting Pete Carroll, let alone the franchise. So I think we're going to make some splashes. There's no way around it. We're rebuilding right now, so we have to splash.
Hey, 100%, bro. I mean, I wrote down some notes just because I do want to talk about this in a future show, but all eyes are on Pete Carroll and John Schneider. I mean, you don't trade arguably the best Seattle sports athlete in the history of Seattle sports and Russ Wilson and then enter the year with a Drew Lock at quarterback. I mean, even if the plan is to tank this upcoming season for a Bryce Young or a CJ Stroud, like what? I mean, are we supposed to be patient? Since 2017, again, we're 1-4 in the playoffs. The Jaguars have more playoff victories than us, so the fan base can only be, so much more patient for a Pete Carroll. I think time is ticking. Even if he's looking at this upcoming season as a rebuild or a retool type of year, like you said, squad, time is ticking. He's not going to be here forever, and he's only getting older. He'll be 71 by the time the season starts, and so I'll be real curious to see how we attack the draft. Are we going to trade down, or what if Malik Willis' stock increases? Are we going to have to trade up? Let's say the Atlanta Falcons, they trade a Matt Ryan. They're going to need a quarterback. Even if they keep a Matt Ryan, they're still going to need a quarterback. Carolina, let's say they missed out on a Deshaun Watson. They're going to be intrigued by Malik Willis. And so there's plenty of different directions and avenues in which Seattle could go this offseason towards attaining their next quarterback. I just know that all eyes, and there's going to be a whole bunch of pressure on those two guys. But going back to the re-signings, I love the deals. I think Quandre Diggs, I don't know if I mentioned already, I think he's the most underrated safety in football. This now puts him, I think, 6th or 7th in terms of the highest paid safeties in the game. I think that's right along the lines of where he lies as far as his standing among safeties. I think Will Dissly, slightly overpaid, but my takeaway from that deal is that he's going to be integrated more, not just in the blocking game, but in the pass game. I mean, people forget that, yes, he's predominantly a blocking tight end, but we've seen him on the field from time to time. We've seen him, on deep Russell Wilson play action shots. We've seen what he can do. We know what he's capable of as a receiver. And so I don't think Gerald Everett comes back. I think Will Dissly, in his new contract, that kind of solidifies that. Him and Noah Fant, I think they'll form maybe not a devastating, but definitely a solid duo at tight end. As for Sidney Jones, 1 year, $3.5 million. I mean, that's a steal. He was one of the better corners in football the second half of last year. I think this kind of alleviates some of the pressure for Trey Brown to have to come back and start week 1 just because he is coming off a torn patellar tendon. Who knows, though? Maybe Seattle isn't done making moves in the cornerback room. Stephon Gilmore is still out there, and he's been linked to Seattle. And so plenty of moves left to be made. Al Woods, again, another value signing. He is 34 years old, but one of the primary reasons why Seattle finished in the top 10 last year as far as run defense. But any last words on the free agents? Anything you guys want to add?
Well, yeah, I thought Ari brought up a good point, and I don't know about y'all gentlemen, but I know heading into this offseason on my Seattle Seahawks to-do list was replace both tackles. Like I thought we were going to have to replace our right tackle and our left tackle. I don't know how feasible that is now that we've got rid of our quarterback. Now we have more money to do it, but not a lot of people are going to be signing up to protect Drew Lock because of it's just not as exciting. It's not as enticing as going and protecting Russell Wilson in Denver or all these other quarterback options, right? Joe Burrow, of course. But Ari talked about how the combination of the tight ends, Will Dissly's the blocker, Noah Fant's the receiver. If we're going to bring in a guy like Noah Fant, play him at tight end, we tried something similar with Jimmy Graham, and it didn't work out too great, right? A receiving tight end. If you're going to do it, you have to have another tight end that you can keep into block to help on those tackles that need to be replaced. And might not get replaced. So I completely agree with Ari's point about the combination of if you're going to go and trade for a Noah Fant, you need a Disley on the backside to stay home while Fant's out there getting open.
All right, no doubt, no doubt. Well, we are going to transition towards more NFL news as opposed to Seahawk news. As I alluded to at the beginning of the show, the NFL in the past week has been crazy. I forgot to even put in that little caption down below the Amari Cooper trade. You know, Cleveland finally gets their number one wide receiver, but ever since Russell Wilson was traded to the Broncos, Commander Carson has become a thing. Amari Cooper is now in Cleveland. Deshaun Watson is having 10 plus teams lining up for his services. We have Khalil Mack going to the Chargers in a trade for only a second round pick, pairing up with the Joey Bosa. And then a couple days later, they signed a top 5 cornerback and JC Jackson to 5 years, $82.5 million. And on Twitter, I pointed this out, but Denver, how are they going to react? I know Chandler Jones has been linked to Denver. Russell Wilson has been actively recruiting Bobby Wagner to Denver. Von Miller has openly talked about going back to Denver. Do I look better in 40? Do I look better in 58? I don't know. We'll come back to Denver and we'll find out. You know, I mean, he is coming off a Super Bowl ring in LA. I know he still has a family in Denver, so I think it's very plausible. I think it's very feasible that we see a Von Miller back in Denver. Tom Brady shocked the NFL world yesterday by returning to the NFL. What do you guys make of all the news here? I want to start with the Chargers. Where do you guys rank the Chargers in the AFC West? Whoever wants to go first, have at it.
Go ahead, Ari.
I think it all comes down to staying healthy for them. That's kind of been a big problem for them. They've always had the talent to be a really good team. So I think they have the upside to be the best team in that division if they can all stay healthy. In terms of power rankings, I would put them number 2. I would put them ahead of Denver and just behind Kansas City right now. But I think they have the upside to be the best team in the division if everyone can stay healthy.
Okay. Squab?
Oh my gosh. This is one of the hardest divisions to predict. It's the NFC West of the past 2 seasons. It's the fact that there are 3 quarterbacks that anyone in the NFL would trade for, and a 4th that half of the free teams would trade for, and Derek Carr. I think the quarterback talent alone is a reason why this division is the best in the NFL. I think you look at the moves that the Chargers have made, not just this year, but last year too. This year, going out and getting J.C. Jackson, going out and getting Khalil Mack. You already had Derwin James and Nasir Adderley. But then you talk, and I haven't even mentioned Joey Bosa yet, but then you talk about what they've done last year when they went out and got Kenneth Murray, the top linebacker in the draft, and when they went out and got Rashawn Slater, one of the top tackles, if not the top tackle in the draft, and what they did in free agency, going out and get Corey Linsley and Brian Bulaga. The Chargers missed the playoffs by a hair last year. I honestly think, based on all these moves, right now they're the best team in this division. I think the Chargers, if the season started today, with J.C. Jackson being the last signature on their roster, I think the Chargers would win this division. I know the Chiefs are an insanely good team. I'm concerned about how much they're going to have to start paying Patrick Mahomes. Their jump is about $20 million this year in Patrick Mahomes' cap hit. That's going to be a couple budget cuts around the organization that are inevitable. And they've only won 1 Super Bowl in this stretch when Patrick Mahomes was getting paid barely anything. It's falling apart. I don't know if it's ever going to be as good as what it once was. They're trending the wrong direction. One of the biggest things in sports is finding the team that's trending in the right direction. I think Denver's well on their way. I think Denver and the Chargers are atop this division. I think Kansas City will be fighting for second place.
Hey, honestly, my brother, would it be a stretch to say that Kansas City's the 3rd best team in the division? Because I think right now, until the Broncos make moves, I think, yes, the Chargers are the best team in the division, followed by the Broncos, and then followed by the Chiefs. Or maybe the Chiefs and the Raiders could duke it out for the third spot, because the Raiders, a lot of people, I think it's safe to say that they're a very underrated football team. A lot of people like Derek Carr. I'm not saying they could beat the Chiefs, but they have beaten the Chiefs before. Like you said, Squab, you want to look for the teams that not only are on an upward trajectory, on the opposite end of the spectrum, when looking at teams that you think are going to fall off the next year, you want to look at teams that, are kind of on the lower end of the spectrum and kind of on a downward trajectory. And I think the Chiefs kind of fit along those lines. They got to pay Pat Mahomes now. Tyrann Mathieu might leave. That's the heart and soul of the defense. And so if he leaves, are you going to rely on a Frank Clark, Jaron Reed, Chris Jones? Who are you going to have on the back end? And so right now, yeah, I agree. Chargers, I hope they don't charger it up, though, because they always find a way to charger it up. I know Justin Herbert is not – he's different. He's a different human being. I mean, that dude is different. My gosh, one of two quarterbacks in the NFL last year to throw for over 5,000 yards, and he's doing this in his second year in the league. I mean, that brother is special. But at the end of the day, talent on paper does not win you football games. Ask the Cleveland Browns. Ask the Philadelphia Eagles dream team. And so at the end of the day, they still have to win football games by way of their head coach, by way of other pieces coming together. Brandon Staley, I don't know if I trust him to be that guy and steering the ship. And so maybe, I don't know, the Broncos and the Chargers are kind of neck and neck. And I say that because I expect the Broncos to go after Chandler Jones or Von Miller or both. And so who knows, but I can't say this I can't say this definitively. The Chargers and the AFC West, the rest of the teams in that division, absolutely loaded. Russell Wilson he's no stranger to loaded divisions. And so I know a lot of people are kind of talking about Russ and, he's coming to such a tough division. He's played in the best division of football for the last 5 to 6 years. He's a great competitor, and the greats, they embrace the competition. They don't run away from it. That said, speaking of the ultimate competitor, Tom Brady. Tom Brady, Mr. Thomas Edward Patrick Brady Jr. is back in the NFL. I don't want to be that guy, but if you guys have been tuning in, last month I dropped an episode why Tom Brady will be back, or the truth about Tom Brady and why he'll eventually be back with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, I don't know if this was leveraged to potentially force his way to San Francisco. I don't know if he was truly done with the game when he retired a month ago. I don't know what played into it, but some of the reasons why I talked about why Tom Brady is going to be back is because he's the comeback king. He's not leaving the game on a failed comeback attempt. That's what's not going to happen. Not against the reigning defending Super Bowl champions and the LA Rams. He lost to the reigning defending champions like that without a fully healthy roster. Better believe he's going to run it back. And now that Russ is left the NFC, I don't think he looks at Aaron Rodgers as a true threat in the NFC. I mean, ever since he won the Super Bowl, his record in the playoffs is under 500. And so until Aaron Rodgers proves otherwise, until he can prove that he could elevate his game in the playoffs, I don't look at the Packers as a threat. The only legitimate threat in the NFC, opposite of the Buccaneers, are the Rams. And so, Squab, I want to start with you, bro. What do you make of the news? Are you surprised? Did you know that this was going to happen? And ultimately, do you see him sticking it out in Tampa? I know in his social media post, he did mention Tampa, but there are still some reports out there that he could potentially angle, a trade towards San Fran. Bro, there's so much to unpack. What do you make of all this?
There is so much to unpack here. I was shocked at how quickly it happened. I think the Russell Wilson trade had a lot to do with it. I think when Tom Brady's realizes Russell Wilson's in the AFC, you mentioned it. The Rams, that's one team Tom Brady has to be concerned about. The Packers are another team he has to look out for, but Tom Brady is not in the slightest afraid of Aaron Rodgers, especially come the postseason. So he saw an open lane. He saw Sean Payton gone, no Drew Brees in the NFC South. Other teams about to mortgage their entire future for Deshaun Watson, who still could get suspended more. We don't know that it's going to happen, but there's a chance. So I think Tom Brady saw a very open lane. I think Tom Brady spent some time away from football and realized how much he missed it already. I feel like this was one of those moments where, because he's Tom Brady, he can get away with it. You can retire, unretire. We're all going to watch you. We're all going to tune in. Teams are going to want you. We all still need you. Everyone wants you. You can get away with it. It honestly felt like one of those posts on social media. That retirement post was when you get really excited in the first week of knowing your partner and then you post about them, and then in week 2 you get to know them a little bit more and realize they're not for you, and you have to go back on that previous post where you were so in love and I guess just blown away by how much you're emotionally attached to someone. I feel like that's a little bit what Tom Brady's doing here. He posted about his retirement. He made this quick judgment and part of it was because it started getting leaked and he wanted to be the one to share the information. And so I feel like he was pressured to an extent to come out with that information just because he doesn't want to retire later and he knew that he would have time to change his mind. But because he's Tom Brady, he changed his mind. He knew he'd get away with it. It's not going to cost him anything. They're 2 guards. Those are what need to be replaced. Easy. You and I talked on the phone earlier. The right guard was retired, and their left guard now is going to Cincinnati, I believe. And so now they're talking about potentially unretiring the right guard and potentially going in the draft after a left guard. Either way, it's 2 positions that need to be filled. But when you got Tom Brady in the backfield, you can fill them. So it blew my mind how quickly he turned it around. He's like, no, I'm rich. I changed my mind. Let's do this again.
Hey, Ari, before you go, I just want to say, bro, he did spend about 6 or 7 weeks consecutively with his family. And so what if he just got tired? Or what if his family got tired of him? I mean, I think that's a very real possibility. He spent so much the last 20 years, playing football. And I said this on a show that I was on earlier. I shout out this just in, by the way. Yo, when you've spent that much time, when you're that dedicated to your craft, maybe you just start to find, or you go on vacation, right? You clear up your mind. You spend 5, 6, 7 weeks away from the game. You've had time away from the season. The way that his year ended, it ended in a heartbreak. And so sometimes when you're feeling emotional, you're going to make emotional decisions. Your head's not clear. And so Brady was just like, you know what, man, it was such a grueling season. We're going to lose like that. I'm going to call it quits. My family's been begging for it to happen. I'm going to call it quits. And so I don't know. I think it's all just very fascinating. I hope he doesn't force his way to San Fran. I mean, it's not like we need any more threats in the NFC West, especially given the fact that right now our starting quarterbacks are either going to be Drew Lock or Geno Smith. So we don't need a Tom Brady joining the division. Ari, were you at all surprised or was this expected?
I saw a funny tweet. I think it was like Giselle asked Tom Brady to fold a fitted sheet, and now the entire NFL is paying for it. So, of course, he had to overshadow Selection Sunday, March Madness. But I can't say I agree with Squabble on that. I'm not going to say like I predicted it to happen, but I'm surprised at how quickly it happened. I thought he might take a year off just to get his body fresh and then come back the following season. But yeah, I mean, obviously the whole world was talking about it. He made the tweet and Instagram post, saying that he is coming back, and the whole NFL world went crazy.
Yo, all I gotta say is that Commander Carson is now a thing, and so yes, the NFL is very crazy. I know this is a little older, but Squabo, is Commander Carson, is he an upgrade over at Taylor Heineke in Washington? And do you see this team making the playoffs next year in a very loaded division that is the NFC East?
The only chance they have at making the playoffs is the 7th seed because the NFC is crap. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. I think they're going to realize pretty quickly that Carson Wentz right now is not much of an upgrade, if at all, over Taylor Heineke. I don't think it changes life at all. I think they are in the boat with the New York Giants. They're a little bit better than New York roster-wise, but they're not too much better. I think they're going to be in close games in their division, except with the Cowboys, who are probably going to spank them a little bit. And now the Eagles, I could see spanking up on them a little bit just because now they have Carson Wentz. I think this made Washington versus Philadelphia games that much more interesting. That is all that it changed.
Just like that, huh? Ari, and looking at Carson Wentz to Washington, I got to just sneak in a little fantasy question here. Is Terry McLaurin now the best quarterback he's ever had in his career? And does this make him finally a wide receiver one?
I think you can say it's the best quarterback he's ever had, and that obviously isn't saying much. I think fantasy-wise, I mean, we saw Michael Pittman was, okay with Wentz last year, but that was with the running game and with the offensive line. So I still don't think McLaurin's ceiling is going to be untapped with Wentz under center, but I think he'll be better. I think Wentz is more than not kind of a lateral move from Taylor Heineke. I think he's maybe you could say a slight upgrade, I guess talent-wise. But at the end of the day, I agree with you guys that as a team and as an offense, Washington isn't going to be that much better, I don't believe.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's in the bigger picture of things, it is more of a lateral move more so than anything, but it is an upgrade nevertheless. And because it is such a weak division, I mean, you never know what could happen. I don't know if Ron Rivera is exactly the type of guy that's going to engineer a career resurgence from Carson Wentz, but I guess we'll see. We'll touch on a few more things before we sign off here in the next 10 minutes, but I got to ask one more big trade. Amari to the Browns. I know Baker Mayfield has had trouble, forming chemistry with an OBJ. We're all not very high on Baker Mayfield, I don't think. And so is this going to help a Baker Mayfield in his quest to securing a long-term contract extension with the Browns? And was this a win as far as the trade goes for the Cleveland Browns? Ari, I'll start with you.
I don't think it's a win, I would say. I mean, they take on, I believe, all of his contract, if I'm not mistaken. And so I saw a lot of people asking why they only had to give up, I think it was a 5th and 6th round pick, and that's because of the cap situation and all the money Cooper is owed. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it's going to be kind of a neutral situation for the Browns. I mean, obviously, I would say Cooper is, at least I can think of, the best receiver Baker Mayfield's ever had in the NFL. And I think from a fantasy perspective, from like volume alone, Cooper is going to see a lot of targets. They released Jarvis Landry, and so they don't have many other weapons on that offense receiving wise. Outside of Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt and everything. But I mean, I feel like Dallas, in a way, like I think it was good for Dallas getting that cap open because I know that they're having some really trouble. I'm a believer that CeeDee Lamb is capable of taking over that wide receiver one role, and then you pair that with Gallup, who is coming off the injury. But I assume that they think he's going to be fully healthy based off the contract that they gave him, and maybe they draft a receiver on the rookie deal as well. So that's kind of how I view it.
All right, squad, before you answer that, I just want to address a question in the chat. Do we re-sign Dwayne Brown? First of all, Deezy, thank you so much for tuning in, for joining us. I don't think we re-sign Dwayne Brown. I think there's options out there, not only in the draft, but if we want to go slightly younger and if we want to be more aggressive in free agency than we have been all this time under Pete and John, why not go after a Terran Armstead? Why not swing a trade for a Laramie Tunzel? You know what I mean? I don't think with Russ no longer in Seattle, I don't think there's too much of a need to bring back a Dwayne Brown. And besides, he's probably in the final years of his career. He's going to want to ring chase. He's going to want to have a better chance at winning. I know what he had here in Seattle was special, but I just don't really see the point. Do you guys want to add anything before Squab, you touch on Amari to Cleveland?
Our quarterback situation, Dwayne Brown is on the end of his career going down. Our quarterback of our future is not yet in our locker room. So I say we figure out tackle first and then go quarterback. So that means Brown needs to go yesterday.
Okay, and as for Cooper, was that a win for the Browns? And do you see his arrival in Cleveland resurrecting Baker Mayfield's career?
Now, Steezy, I'm going to tell you something real quick because we're in a lot of fantasy leagues together. Amari Cooper might not even be on my board. I'm not going to go to him. When you put an inconsistent wide receiver with an inconsistent quarterback and an inconsistent offense that runs the football first, Amari Cooper is going to be one of those. I have no clue whether to start him this week. I think as of right now, and obviously we still have the draft and free agency and all that stuff to go through. As of right now, I would not even draft him. He has Odell Beckham Jr. syndrome in Cleveland. He is a guy who gets sold out when he's not there. He's going or on the road. He checks out of games. He'll just not even go in for game-winning drives or attempts to go tie or take the lead. Right, so he'll check out of games, and then you're telling me you're going from America's team, the biggest franchise in American sports, to the Cleveland Browns. If you weren't bought in Dallas after getting traded from the Raiders, I don't see great things happening in Cleveland. I think this is a ship that is sailing. I think Baker Mayfield's going to be in a new place within the next 3 years. I think Amari Cooper's going to be elsewhere as well, somewhere trying to revitalize his career that got derailed even more in Cleveland. I think Dallas was smart for making this deal. They could have got more compensation. I think they're smart for making the deal to a place where he's going to look bad, and that is Cleveland.
Wow. See, I'm a little more bullish on Baker Mayfield than you guys. I'm not saying that he's all of a sudden going to blossom into, a superstar quarterback with an Amari Cooper in town, but I just feel like with Amari Cooper, he's not an Odell Beckham Jr. He's not the type of receiver that's going to have to rely on explosive athleticism, on explosive speed. He's not that type of receiver. He's a lot more nuanced at the position. He's one of the game's best route runners at the position. He's a technician. And yes, he's been inconsistent, only had about 800 yards in Dallas last year. I mean, you had Stephen Jones calling you out after the year, talking about essentially, we pay this guy $100 million to underperform. And so I understand that, but once upon a time, Baker Mayfield was drafted first overall. Once upon a time, he did win Heisman, in college. Once upon a time, he did have he's had a couple of decent seasons, in the NFL. And Jarvis Landry, with the exception of last year, in every healthy season in Cleveland, he had 70 plus catches. And so he was the number one guy. He was the target hog. I don't even know if 70 catches is a reasonable floor for an Amari Cooper, but I just feel like with his presence, I think we're going to see the best version of Baker Mayfield. He's never played with a route runner as nuanced as an Amari Cooper. And I guess we'll wait and see, but are any last words, especially as it pertains to Fantasyland?
No, yeah, I mean, I agree with both of you guys. I think Cooper is going to be inconsistent as he's been his whole career in terms of fantasy football. I'm not going to say his addition is a bad thing for Baker. Like I said, I think he's the best receiver he's ever had to work with. Like I think you were saying, Steezy. But I still think it's just going to be a lot of inconsistency for both of them all the way around.
Okay, no doubt. Before we close out the show, quickly though, I do just want to touch on the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, my gosh, has this team been on an absolute spending spree? They made Christian Kirk, what was it, the fourth highest paid receiver in the game? Third highest, and he does not yet have a 1,000-yard season on his resume? Like, yes, good for him. I'm never going to be disappointed at a guy, going after his money. Go get your bag, brother. But it's like the Jaguars. What were you doing? What are you doing? And Ari, you and I had a little back and forth on Instagram earlier today. I think this is going to crater Laviska Shenault's value just because Shenault, to me, excels primarily in the slot. Now, he can't play on the outside, but last year, what did he do on the outside? Christian Kirk can't play on the outside, but he's best utilized in the slot. And so if you were going to replace a DJ Chark, why not go for a bigger bodied actual possession receiver? I don't know what Jacksonville is doing here. Obviously, it's going to help the offense. It's going to help the development of a Trevor Lawrence. So you franchise tag a Cam Robinson. There's still moves to be made. Travis Etienne is going to come back. And so you have weapons to work with. Obviously, DJ Chark is probably out the door. But in giving Christian Kirk that much money, I don't know if I would have done it. But I guess good thing I'm not a GM in the NFL. They've also brought in Brandon Scherf from the Washington Commanders, one of the better guards in all of football. Fellas, what do you think? Is Jacksonville, are they on the cusp of potentially reaching the playoffs? Are they closer to being the Bengals than we think? Or are all these moves moot? Squabo?
Well, all this combined with the first overall pick, they're going to get a monster. They're going to get Evan Neal. They're going to get Clavon. I'm blanking on Aiden Hutchinson. Excuse me. Thank you. The main best pass rusher out of Michigan in the draft, right? So, or they might even go with a Thibodeau out of Oregon. So they have a whole bunch of options within the first pick in the draft to go after a huge either stalwart tackle or a pass rusher, two things that are irreplaceable. Either one of those, whoever they go with, they're going to have a legitimate option on their team now, a legitimate piece along with Trevor Lawrence. And you mentioned it. I think one of the biggest differences is going to be Travis Etienne. We didn't get to see him at all. Now he's back with Trevor Lawrence, a young quarterback, especially his best friend is a running back. I think Etienne is going to go off this year. I think he's going to be spectacular. I don't know if I'm going to draft a single Jaguars receiver in fantasy just because I don't know which one, and that's going to be a big confusing thing for me. I think they're building in the trenches, and that's important. I do think this can definitely be a playoff team. The AFC is loaded, but because of where they're building in the trenches and their defense wasn't as bad as people think last year. So I think they're trending in the right direction. Depending on how they use this top draft pick, especially if they get a guy like Evan Neal or Aiden Hutchinson, I think they're going to be ready to make a run at the playoffs.
Man, the Jaguars look, like I said, I like what they're doing, but I'm not so sure about the whole Christian Kirk thing. Squab, I thought you made some brilliant points. I almost forgot that they had the number 1 overall pick in the draft. And I assume they're going to take an Evan Neal just because Cam Robinson at left tackle. I didn't really like what I saw last year at left tackle. So maybe they had planned of moving him to right tackle. You bring in an Evan Neal, you solidify 2 positions there, and then a Brandon Scherf. You have a quality center. They could have one of the more improved offensive lines in football next year. And so to the folks out there, I'd say watch out for the Jaguars. I think they're a sneaky contender. Maybe for the division. I get that the AFC is stacked, so maybe let's not go there. But Ari, any takeaways from what the Jacksonville Jaguars are doing?
No, I mean, like you said, congrats to Kirk on, getting his bag. But I mean, you look at what the Patriots did last offseason, getting like Hunter Henry, Nelson Aguilar, Johnny Smith, like paying a lot of money to all these guys, and like their offense was better, but it still wasn't, fantastic. And so I think that's what we'll see from Jacksonville. I liked the Doug Peterson hiring as the head coach. I think he'll be a lot better than Urban Meyer for Trevor Lawrence and, his development. But, like you guys have been saying, I think the AFC is too stacked for them to be a playoff contender. But, I mean, if you look at that division right now, I mean, obviously you have Tennessee at the top. And then the Colts, we'll see what they do at quarterback, potentially Garoppolo or Minshew or whatever. But, yeah, I mean, I think they're trending in the right direction, especially on the offensive line. To an extent, we'll see how they do with number 1 overall pick, but I don't think they're going to be anything like special in terms of like a playoff contender this upcoming season.
Agreed. Maybe I was reaching a little bit. We have some people in the chat saying, "Yo, let's talk Seahawks." I apologize, y'all. We was talking Seahawks for the majority of the show. I just wanted to touch on some NFL news, but real quick to address some of the folks before we do go in the next couple of minutes. Jay Everett, I'm from the group chat. What's up, bro? Hey, thank you so much for taking the time to tune in. Here's a question, though. Yo, Steezy, it's Cam the Boss from Twitter. My question is, what remaining free agents do you think the Seahawks should/could realistically sign? Squabo, I'm going to hand out the torch to you, my brother. What say you?
See, this is a really tough question. Just off the top of my head, I can't think of too many because I think we're not looking to rebuild through free agency. I think it really does come down to the draft. I think we're probably going to trade back from the 9th pick unless there's a guy that shouldn't be there anymore, like a Ekwonu or Evan Neal or some. If there was some crazy guy with the 9th pick that we didn't think was going to be there, we're taking him. But I think we trade back again, and I really think we're rebuilding through the draft here. So I don't think it's going to be some big splashy like, oh my gosh, we just signed Von Miller. We're not doing that. We're not in win now mode. Free agency is for win now mode. We're going to be a day 2, day 3 of free agency. I could see us making a lot of smaller name moves, just not any huge big ticket items.
Totally understandable, bro. I mean, just because we've still yet to really dip our toes into the free agency waters. And so that alone might indicate that, we're looking towards the draft to rebuild. Now, who knows? Maybe we do swing for the fences and make a trade or two, just because Seattle, whenever they do make a trade, it's usually after training camp. It's usually well after the draft. And so who knows? There's still moves to be made in that department. Ari, are there any free agents that you would like Seattle to go after?
No, yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, maybe depending on what the market is for like Rashad Penny, if no one wants to take a chance on him, I think DJ Reed's a possible re-sign. But I mean, in terms of like new players, I agree. I mean, I think they're gonna have to spend money somewhere. So I think they could give some like 1 or 2 year deals to some players, but there's no one that I have in mind that I think is gonna that I guess that people are gonna want to hear, I guess, that off the top of my head.
Okay, I think for me, if I had to answer the question by giving out a free agent or 2 or 3, look, if Pete wants to go back to really running the football, Squabo, you've been on record saying this, but Trent Brown, a behemoth of a human being. I mean, 6'8", 300 plus pounds. I know he's not necessarily, well, no. Yeah, no, I wouldn't be opposed to it. I know we're in rebuild mode, maybe, but we still need to protect whoever we bring in at quarterback, and we still have a need at right tackle. Maybe you have him compete with the Jay Curhan. I think both those guys have similar play styles. They're very dominant in the run blocking aspect of football, but when it comes to pass protection, they definitely still have a few flaws and errors to kind of work with there. But if P is intent and keen on running the football, then why not bring in a run dominant offensive lineman and right tackle Trent Brown? I think another guy to look at aside from our own free agents, because I think Rashad Penny's next. I think DJ Reed is next. Look, Jadeveon Clowney. I just don't think there's very much league-wide interest in a Jadeveon Clowney. I think Cleveland would be the other team that I think is in the sweepstakes. But why not come back to Seattle? Clint Hurt was talking about how the defense is going to be far more aggressive. We're going to be looking for guys, that are going to look to get downhill. Jadeveon Clowney might not be an ideal team's number one pass rusher, but as a run defender, as a guy that could, generate pressures and quarterback hits, I think he'd be perfect in that role. He'd have maybe not a plethora, but he'd have other guys in the rotation to kind of work alongside with as far as getting after the quarterback. But there is familiarity. He has played in a 3-4. And if Pete wants to make his mark in both the run game and on defense, then why not build and add in a couple of guys via free agency on the defensive side of the ball? And then maybe in the draft, you focus on the offensive line. You focus on, a quarterback. You focus on other positions. And so I think that's kind of how Seattle wants to address this coming offseason. There won't be too many outside free agents coming in, but expect DJ Reed, Rashad Penny, and our other guys to be re-signed. Randy Gregory, that's possible, but he's also, I think, a lot closer to 30 than he is to 25. I'm not sure how realistic he is. Brett, what were we doing giving all the money to Will Dissly? Like I mentioned, I think that's an indication that he's going to be used more in the passing game. He has been explosive for us in the past. It's all about just kind of unlock his potential in that regard. But unless you guys have any more questions out there in the chats, we're about to call this a wrap. Thank you so much again. We've been live for about an hour and a half now. For those of you guys that have been tuning in the whole time, I can't thank you enough. This is always fun. And shout out to Squabo, shout out to Ari, shout out to Miss Michaela and Kate. It's been a star-studded cast tonight. I was supposed to have, actually, I don't even want to say his name yet. We'll talk about that later. Later in the week, though, we'll have a couple of special guests, former Seahawk players. I'll say that. And so definitely be sure to stay tuned. Please hit that subscribe button, man. Squabo says we're on the road to 1K, so please, please, please help him get there. They're here. As Squabo says, please, 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 please hit that subscribe on Instagram. The fantasy football expert himself. Let's get him to 100K on Instagram, y'all. So for those of you guys that are prepping for fantasy football, your drafts all night, you play Dynasty, Ari Kozlow, a.k.a. fantasy.football expert on Instagram. Please give him a follow. Give my brother Ask Squabo a subscribe on YouTube. And I want to give this opportunity for you guys to kind of shout yourselves out. Squabo, Ari, any last words?
Hey, definitely subscribe to Steezy. Obviously, he's blowing up. He's doing all this amazing stuff wherever he's at right now. He's going so much farther than this. So definitely stay tuned. You want to be a part of this success story while you still can. So just Steezy is spectacular. Definitely hit that subscribe button. On my channel personally, what you can expect coming soon. I've been the president and GM of the student-run TV station at Washington State for this past year. I'm almost done with that. So pretty soon, in just over a month, as summer gets in, and I'm set to graduate, hopefully this December. So I have a lot more time to focus on my YouTube channel. I also do TikTok at Squabo Says. Both of those things are getting a lot more attention. The next videos that you can expect, I went to Vegas last week or 2 weeks ago and covered the women's basketball tournament. And I've been editing up the footage. And I'm going to put together multiple videos just out of the one trip. I was on the court inside the huddles. I was getting insane footage of the championship team, of Russell Wilson right before he got traded. So there's a whole lot of insider stuff that you're only going to get access to on my channel. So definitely stay tuned for that.
Please, please, please hit that subscribe for Ask Squabo Says if you aren't already. Ari?
I have nothing else to promote. I just wanted to thank you for having me on. Both you and Squabo, I've kind of been watching your guys' YouTube for a while now. So thank you again for having me on. I hope to do it again soon.
Hey, and do it again, we will. Ari, Squabo, again, thank you so much for hopping on late notice. I have a tendency of doing that for those of you guys that know me. But like I said, expect a couple of former Seattle Seahawks players. I won't yet reveal the names, but if you are interested or if you want to take a guess, send me a DM, Twitter, Instagram, @SteezySmith. And maybe if I'm feeling generous, I'll fill you in. And maybe Squabo might be willing to spill the beans too. Who knows? You guys can send him a DM as well. You can expect him hopefully on the next show, time permitting. But again, if you've been tuned in, this has been your host, Calvin-Domingo, aka Steezy Smith. Signing off, man. Go Hawks. All right. Again, this video is going to be dedicated to Mr. Todd Nas. While that concludes this video, we have loads of other content. You don't have to stop watching there. Other content on our channel homepage, as well as our social media platforms. And again, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for us. Tell a friend and tell a friend. Nothing but love, and Steezy out.